We now welcome you to the season 2, episode 1 in the legal landscape. We have been doing it here on Top of the Morning for some time. Took a little break, and now we're back at you starting today. Today's topic, by the way, is forming a company and closing a company. Startup businesses are key drivers of economic growth and job creation. The increased use of e-commerce and the shift to virtual business by multiple product and service industries created opportunities for many individuals to form new companies. So while many companies have survived and thrived during the pandemic, others have fallen victim to the challenges encountered and have had to close their doors, unfortunately. In this, the first of many episodes of Season 2 of the Legal Landscape, we will discuss what you ought to know when forming a company and when closing a company. And remember that this feature is carried in partnership with our friends at DunnCox Attorneys at Law. Our very special guest this morning is a partner at DunnCox Attorneys. We have with us Mrs. Roxanne Miller McFarlane. Good morning, Mrs. Miller McFarlane. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And thank you for joining us. We welcome our listeners, and we welcome you. I think it's the first time we're getting a chance to talk to you here inside of Season 2. Thank you for joining us once again, okay?
No problem.
All right. Now, first of all, Mrs. Miller McFarlane, how do you form a new company?
Okay, it's a fairly straightforward process. What you need to do is complete 2 forms. This registration form and the articles of incorporation. Luckily, both these forms are available for download free on the company's office website, so you can just go ahead and download them, complete them, and then once you've completed them, you take them in with a government ID for the person you've identified as the principal director on the form to the company's office of Jamaica and pay the requisite fee, and then your documents will be processed.
Just like that?
Yes, just like that.
But that is if you decide not to utilize the services of an attorney at law. So you're saying that it can be done by an individual just the same, pretty much?
Yeah, I hope I'm not arguing against myself, but yes, it can be done by an individual.
Yes. Okay. By the way, we're taking calls. If anyone has questions, Mrs. Miller McFarlane will be quite happy to answer, so long as we're talking about the whole matter of forming a company and closing a company. Now, I want to ask, the phone number, by the way, is 876-906-9557. Now, what information do you need for the incorporation documents then?
Okay. All right. So I mentioned before that you have to fill out these forms. So what you're going to need, obviously, is the name of the company. Because you're not guaranteed to get the name you want, I usually recommend that you reserve the name before submitting the documents so that you'll know that when you submit the documents with this name, it'll be available. You pay a little bit extra to reserve, but it's certainly worth it because once you reserve the name, you have it available for 90 days. So you have your time to complete your forms and submit them on time. So you're going to need the name of the company.
Right.
And of course, you're going to need the core business of the company. So for instance, if you're starting a food delivery company, you're going to say the business is food delivery service. Mm-hmm. You're also going to need shareholders. The most common form of company is a private company limited by shares. So you're going to mention the shareholders, their name, their address. Can be as many or as little, private companies, a maximum of 20 shareholders. But you can start the company 1 shareholder, 1 share. And as the business grows, you can change that if you want. You also need directors. You can have 1 director, a minimum of 1 director. The information you need is like what you'd expect: contact details, name, address, occupation, TRN number. It's very important. Need the TRN for virtually every government office. And also, companies in Jamaica need a company secretary. So the same information you're going to need for your company secretary: name, address, contact information, TRN. Mm-hmm. Also, you're going to need the address of the company and when you plan the company to start business. And luckily for the form, which is something that was started a few years ago, a lot of people need a TCC, a tax compliance certificate, as soon as they start. Mm-hmm. The form allows you to tick, if you want, at no extra cost, if you want a TCC at incorporation. So I find my clients find that quite useful.
Okay.
So you can indicate on the form.
But all in all, it's fairly basic information that is required at the start. What if I come up with a name that already exists, though?
Unfortunately, the registrar will not allow you to form a company with a name that already exists. So they're going to ask you to change it before you can complete the incorporation process.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to ask you to pick another name.
And going back to the example you used, I think it was of a delivery service company, for instance. Is it recommended that the person forming the company just uses that as the activities that they want to carry out, or would you say that they could broaden it just in case in the future they decide to do other stuff?
Oh, you absolutely can. The form asks you to state the core business. So you're not in any way, shape, or form limited to only that business. It is quite common, as you know, in Jamaica for companies to have many different business lines. So you're not limited in the future at all if you want to go into future areas of business.
Okay. Now, can I use my home address as the company's address?
You can. You can use your home address as the company's registered office. What is required is that it must be an address in Jamaica and it must not be a P.O. box.
Okay. Now, so we're focused primarily on starting the company, but I want now for us to switch focus and look at how we close a company or terminate the company. Can you take us through that process?
Sure. All things that started, you may want to end, so you certainly should have an idea of how you go about closing it. There are basically two ways. One is by winding up, and one is a process called strike off. So we'll start with winding up first.
Yes.
Winding up occurs where you gather in the assets of the company, you liquidate them, and use them to settle the debt. Unfortunately, there are situations where there are not enough assets to settle all the debts that the company has, in which case you're insolvent. If that's the case, you have to proceed with winding up under our Insolvency Act, the insolvency legislation, and that's quite an involved process, understandably, because it's designed for the creditors to be treated fairly. Mm-hmm. So that's a long regime, and you certainly need legal advice, accounting advice, unfortunately, if you find yourself in that position where the company is insolvent.
Okay.
You've done well, and the company is solvent, in which case you would proceed with winding up, known as members' voluntary winding up. Basically, the shareholders of the company would pass a resolution saying that, the company's finished trading, we'd like it to be wound up, and we're going to appoint a licensed trustee to be our liquidator to wind up the business. So the liquidator would then go ahead and identify all the debts of the company, speak to all the creditors, make sure he has an idea of what the lay of the land is with the company, and then he'll proceed to liquidate the assets to pay off these debts. Mm-hmm. And when all of this is done, whatever is left, he'll pay over to the shareholders. As you can imagine, this is quite a detailed process. And therefore, there are many filings that have to be done, many notices that have to be published. So winding up is it's a winding.
It can be lengthy.
Yes, it certainly can be.
To the extent you mean like several months or several even more longer than that?
I've seen situations several years.
Oh wow! Okay, all right.
That's in the process.
Yes. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Right. So the other option is strike off. So this happens now where the business has ended and you have no assets or liabilities. You've paid off all the debtors. You've distributed all the assets. So there's nothing to wind up. So there's a procedure that the registrar allows where the directors can write a letter to the company's office saying, we've ceased trading, we have no assets or liabilities, please strike us from the register of companies. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This letter would have to be accompanied by something called an auditor certificate. So basically, the auditor would go through, see the finances of the company, make sure they agree with you that there are no assets or liabilities, there are no outstanding claims out there, and then issue a certificate. Understandably, an auditor is a professional, and he or she has to be paid for their services. Mm-hmm. So usually the company has no assets or liabilities, is not usually in a position to pay an auditor to go ahead and do these checks. They can issue the certificate. Mm-hmm. So what the company's office has done, they've started a, I think, wonderful program called the COVID-19 Relief Initiative, yes, where it says if you want to do the strike-off procedure, you can submit this letter, but instead of accompanying it with an auditor certificate, the directors can sign a declaration before a justice of the peace saying, look, we've ceased trading, we have no assets or liabilities, please strike us from the register. Mm-hmm. If you pay the fee, You submit this letter, you submit the statutory declaration, and if everything is in order, the company's office will accept it. They will then publish a notice in the Gazette that, hey, we intend to strike this company off. Usually wait a few months, strike the company off, and then they publish another notice saying that the company has been struck off. And that's it. The company is dissolved.
Yes. What would you say this morning to somebody who maybe formed a few companies and is not trading with maybe a few of them, but has still not done anything? And wouldn't you suggest that they take some action?
Absolutely, absolutely. Obligations exist. Once a company exists, whether or not it's trading, it has obligations. And those obligations cost money. So you may think an annual return is just a $5,000. I have seen that turn into a $100,000 debt because the person has not filed annual returns for 10, 20, 30 years. And the debt remains. So certainly clean it up.
Yes.
Company if you're not using it.
Right. And you don't want to get summoned to court and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely not.
As we know persons have in the past. Oh, all right. You have answered all the questions. I see here Hillary, one of our listeners, and Gerald sending me notes saying, she just answered the question I was about to ask. So I think you've handled pretty much all that we have time for and all that we need to know at this time. I want to thank you. There. Before you go, though, do you have a did you know tidbit to share with us?
Yes, I do.
What's it?
Say, formalize your business, form a company.
Simple as that.
Yes.
Formalize your business and
form a company.
Form a company. All right. On that note, we thank you so much. Great start to our new season of The Legal Landscape. We wish you a wonderful day today at work. Roxanne Miller McFarlane. Take care.
Thank you. The same to you and your listeners.
Much appreciated. All right. This is a partnership with Edge 105 FM and DunnCox Attorneys at Law. And they join us in presenting The Legal Landscape at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, as you just heard it there. Thanks again to Mrs. Roxanne Miller McFarlane, attorney and partner at DunnCox, for the information she shared with us this morning on forming a company and closing a company.